For over 2 months, we've been discussing the NBA draft, and it's been two of us most of the time, myself and Leif Thulin. So we get together to decide what the answers are for the Utah Jazz next on Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Leif Thulin's going to join us. Justin Zanuck said it yesterday. You got to find what the guys can do, not just what they can't do. At this time of the draft, you start only talking about what they can't do. So Leif and I are going to open up talking about what they can do. Is Cody Williams really just the win for the Utah Jazz in this draft? And if he's not available, what do you do if it's Toppich, Carter, Holland, or Salune? Wins at 29 and 32? Too many guys can't shoot. I know, I just did it. I said can't. We'll get to that with Leif Thulin all coming up. As I mentioned, this is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast in the Utah Jazz. Me insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps as well as on YouTube. Give us your thoughts and comments on YouTube while the show's going on. Hit me at DLock09 or hit him at Leif Thulin. Let's do it. He's been carrying the show, frankly, more than me. He is Leif Thulin. Thank you very much for all your work. You've been great. It's actually going to become a habit because, frankly, your draft analysis is better than mine. Particularly your pronunciation of all the players' names is way better than mine as we get. I don't have to pronounce them correct. My theory is I don't have to pronounce them correctly until October. I'll get them in October. All right, maybe. Let's do it. Let's start with what Justin Zanuck said yesterday. I thought it was interesting. It was one of the last questions I asked him at the press conference. And I basically said, I said to him, this draft to me is a bunch of guys, but they all have a but statement behind them. Reed Shepard's the best analytical player I've ever seen, but he's 6'1". Ron Holland's this amazing body and this athlete, but he can't shoot, right? Everyone's got a but statement about them. And Justin kind of said, that's what drives me the most crazy. At this point in time, criticism's the only thing you hear about any of these players. The fact is you got to find what they can do. So, Leif, let's start there. Who have got the best can-do skills in the game right now?
I think the best individual skill in this draft is Ryan Dunn, and he's not going to be a lottery pick, but what he does do well is he defends like crazy. He is a 38.5-inch vertical 6'9" wing who played at Virginia. If you watch any college basketball, Virginia plays a pack line defense and plays at the slowest pace in college basketball, and yet he accumulated 2 blocks per game, over a steal per game, playing a small forward. How do you get 2 blocks and a steal, playing 52 defensive possessions a game? And that's ridiculous. And not only that, he's also the guy that no one wants to drive against. So his productivity, his metrics, his defensive ability, I think is the best individual skill of anyone in this draft. Yes, he's maybe not the top 10 pick. The Jazz won't take him at 10. Should he be there at 29 or 32? Or if the Jazz consolidate, move up a little bit, like rumors suggest, I absolutely would consider him there, despite the glaring flaw. Like you said, there's butts on a ton of players. He's not a good shooter, but I would absolutely consider him there. And then offensively, if you want a skill, I think Rob Dillingham has the best individual ability to put the ball in the hoop of anyone in this class.
All right, I thought about this. I thought it was great. What about Zach Edey's offensive rebounding?
Yeah, I could get behind that.
Right? I mean, you start looking okay, what can they do? What is the skill? What is the thing that they do super well? It gets Reed Shepard shooting. Frankly, I've got 6 years worth of data. I've never had someone in the 100th percentile for the year and spot up, 99th percentile in catch and shoot, and 99th percentile in jumper off the dribble. That might be the best touch I've ever seen.
He can really shoot it. And the craziest thing is, I'd argue Kentucky used him incorrectly. He only shot 4 threes the entire season off of a screen. 4. What's the biggest weapon for guards? You hammer this home all the time. If you can dribble behind a screen and shoot, you open up so much more at the NBA level. Well, he didn't do that. Rob Dillingham, on the other hand, was excellent at doing so. And I think both of them are some of the best shooters we've had in recent classes, not just this class, at shooting the basketball. They just both happen to be small.
Rob Dillingham, by the way, is just to give you one thing that's interesting on Dillingham, by the way, pretty good transition percentile for a small player and very good rim. And his rim is not as good. So that's a little bit concerning. Like that's where the height, but his shooting that Leif is talking about 97th percentile, 98th percentile catch and shoot, 82nd percentile jumper off the bounce. Like if we start looking at spot up shooters and off the bounce guys that have shot at that level over the last few years, here are the guys that were in the last 5 drafts, Shepherd and Dillingham caliber, like 90% or below or above, excuse me. Peyton Pritchard, DeAndre Hunter, Cade Cunningham, Wendell Moore, which is interesting, by the way. I might go take a flyer on Wendell Moore, who has not played at all in Minnesota because all of his numbers were so good that when they quit on him this year, if I'm somebody, I'm grabbing him. Julian Strother had a pretty good year this year in Denver. We'll see if it pans out. Kobe White, PJ Washington, Dariq Whitehead didn't play last year, or didn't really get much time coming off injury last year. Podajemski, Sasser, Sensabaugh, AJ Griffin, Chris Duarte, who was old, and old guys screw up my numbers. Ty Jerome, who was old and screwed up my numbers. Cam Johnson, Sadiq Bey, Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Johnson, and Aaron Nesmith. Maybe not all stars, but there's not really a bust. There's 1 or 2 busts in there. Like your success rate on guys who've had a catch and shoot percentile over 90%, pretty fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, shooting is the prerequisite to get into the league right now. And there's not many players that can survive without being able to shoot that don't play the center. And so that's why you said at the outset, there's butts attached to all these players. Well, the best athletes in this class tend to be pretty poor shooters. You look at Ron Holland, you look at Matas Buzelis, who despite being kind of gangly, he shoots terribly worse than Holland, yet he's less criticized for it. Even though his numbers throughout high school and at the G League Ignite playing on the same team as Holland were worse. You look at Cody Williams, shot 42% from 3. Now this one's a little weird because he shot really well, but his volume was tiny. He shot 1.6 threes per game. And that's not enough to tell you he can really shoot. Like my theory is the best shooters are the ones who shoot the most because their confidence of the coaches and their teammates say that they can shoot. Like Jordan Hawkins to me was the best shooter of last year's class by a mile because he shot 9 per game on a team that was excellent. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe this is the type of class in which you just bank on those traits and it's however you prioritize your traits. Does size matter to this team more than shooting, or does shooting matter more than size? And that's what's going to be really interesting to see how it unfolds, especially once you get to picks 4 through 7.
If you heard Zanuck in that conversation yesterday, I thought he kind of said his third to last answer was the one I asked him, is when he answered this, but he also says in that, like he runs through, like, it was clear to me the one thing he kind of alluded to, the one thing you can't teach is size, right? Like you can't fix someone's height. You can fix their shot. You can do a bunch of things, which makes this super interesting. By the way, one note on Ryan Dunn, because I thought this was interesting. The narrative on Ryan Dunn is like, he simply, he again, we're getting into the can'ts. So sorry, Justin, but his spot up percentile, just on spot up shooting, was in the 32nd percentile of all college players. Here's why I think this is interesting, okay? Because Bazulis was in the 29th percent of G League players. Holland was in the 30th percentile of G League players. Castle's in the 28th percentile of college players. It's worse than Dunn's. Bub Carrington, who I actually really like, is in the 31st percentile. Salune is in the 29th percentile of his league. Ryan Dunn's, as we mentioned, the 32nd. Like somehow Ryan Dunn right now is the one guy that's really being kind of curtailed for his inability to shoot, where everyone seems to be making excuses for all the other guys who can't shoot.
Yeah, there's like conjecture telling us, oh, well, Buzelis, because he's so coordinated and he's tall and he can dribble, therefore he can shoot. Like there's this assumption that's not there. Fun fact about Ryan Dunn. Dunn came in as a better shooter and grew at Virginia. And he told like interviews about Tony Bennett's defense, which for those of you who don't watch Virginia, they play just defense drills.
Let me pause 1 second. For those of you who don't watch Virginia, are all the luckiest people on the planet. I just want to point that out. If you don't watch Virginia basketball, you're better for that. Okay, sorry, go ahead. They literally had a game this year that was like 14-12 at halftime.
Oh, it was brutal. Colorado State, first 4 game. That was horrible. So, but Ryan Dunn came in as a freshman, and he was kind of a corner 3 guy who was a slasher, about 6'7". Well, he's 6'9" now, and he's become this monster defensive athlete. And he said in an interview that confidence was the biggest thing that was shaken because he became such a good defender. He was so tired. And then once he started missing, he lost confidence shooting. And coming into Virginia, he was a great shooter and an average defender. So there's part of me that believes, maybe that's PR, but there's part of me that believes that he can shoot because, like you said, I've dug into these numbers. Those weren't shocks to me that you just rattled off about the inefficiency of the shooters that are projected to be in the top 10. I have a hard time thinking Dunn really escapes the top 20 because of the individual amazing traits. And then there's a little bit of hope he can become a competent shooter. And then you have Jaden McDaniels. Like, that's the type of comparison you may have on your hands there, should he shoot at all competently.
All right. I'm confused by one thing here. And that is that Justin Zanuck told us we had to talk about the skills that we liked about players. And we did not jump and say anything about Rosh Hashay. We did not say anything about Sarr. We did not say anything about Castle. We did not say anything. We did the opposite about Mazulis. We did not do anything about Connect. We did not say anything about Klingon. You did Dillingham. I did Shepard. Cody Williams, Topic, like of the top 10 players in this draft that are projected right now in the ESPN mock draft, we only mentioned 2 of them. Is that the essence of this draft? Is that it's that flat because these guys don't have that skill that makes you say, wow?
Yeah, I think they're incomplete players. There's glimmers of hope, but not complete players. And the other skill set would be Topic's pick and roll. He's 89th percentile. That's the other one that I was going to mention before I got off on a tangent, but he just tore his ACL. See, there's the but there.
No, the but there is he can't shoot.
That as well.
That's a bigger
88 from the free throw line.
Topic shooting, the flat shot by Topic, I mean, it's really flat, really hard to look at. That's far more bothersome to me than the ACL. Like, if he's available at 10 and the Jazz pass, I'm going to guess it's because of that, not because of the ACL. He's Leif Thulin, Locked On NBA Big Board, also fill in for Locked On Jazz. I'm David Locke. We will continue here. Is Cody Williams the win for the Jazz? He probably not going to be there. So then if it's Topic, Carter, Holland, or Salune, or I'm making my case for my guy again. I'm really like ending up on Jared McCain Island here more than I ever planned. I like building houses, putting in plumbing and all sorts of stuff on his island. We'll talk about that as we continue. It is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. The Hyundai lineup of cars, just fabulous. We got the Palisade right now. It is so great. Just switched in the Tucson, which I love, but I got to say the Palisade is bigger, different level, super sweet car to be driving. So our car pretty much looks like a Hyundai used car lot. We got 2 Santa Fe's, we got an Ioniq, and we got a Palisade. Why? Because it's absolutely the best money you can buy. And the Murdochs, with over 80 years in the market, have done absolutely everything to make sure that you get a no regrets experience each and every time you work with Murdoch Hyundai. So stop by 4646 South State Street, Logan, or in Linden. But you know what? If you're going to do that, stop for a second, and why don't you let me help you out and give you the VIP meeting that you deserve for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network and Locked On Jazz. So email me at dlock09@gmail.com. We'll get you the VIP meeting over at Murdoch when you set up. So email me first before heading over there. We'll get you taken care of. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, the #1 sports book in America, giving you the chance, and this summer long, bonuses every day. That's right. It's hard to believe, but it's true. With the sports world slowing down a little bit, FanDuel's not slowing down at all. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. And right now, here's how it works. Hooking up all customers with boosts or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long at FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon. By the way, keep an eye on the FanDuel odds for who goes as the #1 pick or the #3 pick, because it's always been an interesting thing, like on draft day, when those suddenly spike. We thought a few years ago, Jabari Smith was the #1 pick, and then all of a sudden it flipped and he wasn't anymore, and you knew that someone knew something. It's always a lot of fun to watch those odds at FanDuel.com/lockedon. David Locke along with Leif Thulin here for your Locked On Jazz today. All right. By the way, for your second listen today, Locked On NBA Big Board. It's got to be. Take a second, listen to Locked On NBA Big Board or Locked On NBA as they get you ready for the draft. Leif, is Jazz get Cody Williams slide? Something funky happens. Not outlandish that something weird's going to happen in the top 10. I don't think we have the top 10 projected the way it has in some other years. There's just too much gray area with these players and lack of differentiation. So if Cody Williams is at 10, is it a no-brainer, run to the podium, go get that done?
I believe so. He's my preferred pick. I said that a couple days ago for the everydayers. Cody Williams and Tiajne Salune, I think, are the two most desirable picks that are feasible for the Jazz. And I like Cody Williams because he's the most well-rounded of those type of players. He's got the ability to shoot well. He shot 42% from three, and he's played the point guard. He defended the best player on the opposing teams. He's pick and roll. His repetitions are high enough, even if the numbers weren't amazing. And so I think he could give you something both immediately and the long term. And he at least gives you a little bit of versatility. And I think role versatility is important as opposed to being a specialist in today's league. I think too many 3-and-Ds are pigeonholed into either being good on offense or defense, shooting or on-ball defense, and then they're probably a negative on the other side. He's going to be a slight net positive on both, in my opinion. And in this draft, like we've talked about, there's a lot of detriments holding people back. I think that's a positive, and that's a win in and of itself. I doubt he's there at 10, though.
I haven't watched a ton of them. You've watched far more than I, but the 3 games I watched, there was a play or two where he actually had a burst. He actually, usually, frankly, if I'm being totally honest, he usually turned it over after the burst. Like, he just doesn't have quite good enough handle yet. But he had a little bit of an explosion and a speed and a getting through traffic. I don't think he has the strength or the balance yet to then finish the play. But that burst leads me to think that Cody Williams could become something more than the 3-and-D kind of player you're talking about. And he might have a little wiggle, which I'm not sure some of the other wings have.
I agree with that. He actually did some athletic testing, and Jalen Williams, his older brother, came out as a 21-year-old, so he's more physically mature, all these things. Well, they actually, when he compares as a 19-year-old to Jalen as a 21 in their pre-draft process, their movements are nearly identical as measured by P3. And that's just like a very nerdy draft place they work out, and I caught wind of this. He shoots it better than Jalen did coming out freshman versus freshman. I think Jalen's a more twitchy, physical athlete. Cody's more of a long strider, but they get the same places at the same speed according to those metrics. And like you said, I think the biggest reason for his turnovers is strength. I don't even know if it's necessarily balance. I think it's strength because he gets bumped off of the spot. And in the college basketball was getting older. Like, there were some college lineups that were older than the OKC starting lineup this year. And he was playing in a league that was a veteran-oriented Pac-12. And so I think if he puts on strength, a lot of those turnover issues, maybe not passes being slightly late, finishing issues that he had, even though he was an okay finisher, I think are corrected with strength. And that's why I think he probably doesn't fall to the Jazz, because a lot of people can see that being the fixable thing that makes him better at all the other things where he's got question marks, but like slight positives too. They could turn into large positives. And in this draft, you gotta sign the waiver for that.
Yeah, he's the one player I've actually watched who I guess Stephen Castle if he could shoot, but I'm not I'm not, fundamentally a believer that you move from non-shooter to shooter. Like, I know everybody loves to say that's the skill you can add, and everyone wants to go Kawhi Leonard, and it's like, okay, great. You got me one example in like 15 years. Like, find me, and even the guys who, someone said to me, well, Stephen Castle's Marcus Smart. And I was like, yeah, well, Marcus Smart can't, like, he's still shooting below 40% for his career and 33% from three. Like, he's still not like, so, I do think Castle's got the body and the makeup that makes you think he could do it if he shoots. Williams is the one who, to me, is the closest one to having like the burst that could actually be like a real, the surprise all-star player in the top 10 draft if body gets all the things we talked about. All right. Tell me, TJ Salune is interesting. He makes me really nervous. Like, he's at Basketball Without Borders with no pro contract 12 months ago. He signs his first pro contract, I think, 10 months ago. Like, it feels as though this is like the year Lindsey Hunter got hot because supposedly Jerry West liked him, which is before your time. But there have been these guys all the years. I mean, last year was Koulibaly. It might have actually turned out to be right. But there's always these guys that kind of get the vibe. It's like the unknown. You don't want to miss them. It seems like it happens more now because after Giannis, and there's like this fear as a GM that you might miss out on him. So then he gets hot. Like, are we sure on this?
I would say I'm not sure, but it's funny you mentioned Bilal Koulibaly. Bilal Coulibaly was on a better team, more noticeable because he had Victor Wembanyama. Well, Salon's bigger. He's younger at the same stage, shoots better, has more rebounds per game, and energy is comparable. And Coulibaly's best trait was energy and defense. Salon's a little more raw as a defender, but he's bigger, which allows him more positional versatility. So at least there's the pitch there. But the thing about Giannis is the truth. You basically see one pick transform the way people draft for the last 10 years. Because in that draft, Anthony Bennett went 1. The best 2 picks were Giannis, number 1, 2, Rudy Gobert. That was 13th and 27th. So now who are you looking for? The guys with the craziest traits. Because Giannis was super thin but had long arms and you knew he was raw. Rudy, same thing. And so now who's the player that most resembles Giannis of this draft class? Well, it's clearly Tijan Salon in terms of measurables. Is he a safe thing? Absolutely not. Is he more refined than Giannis was coming in? Yes, because everyone's kind of like, if you have any sort of skill set, you're found at Basketball Without Borders, and all of a sudden you're a starter on a team that makes it to the quarterfinals of the French League, and he scores 19 points, 10 in the fourth quarter in an upset victory, and all of a sudden his stock rises from 17th to 8th. And I think it makes sense, but it is a dangerous game to play to hinge your future on trying to replicate Giannis.
I mean, he's 6'9". He's got the 7'2" wingspan. He's 210 pounds. And so he's not a beanpole, and he's thick. Like, his lower body looks thick. When I've watched, at least on film, he's playing with men and he looks like he fits. So it's he doesn't shoot it great. Like, but I'm not sure actually to the Justin Zanuck comment. Like, I'm not sure what he does. Like, I'm not sure what his skill is. Right? Like, his skill is his body, I guess, at this point. And maybe at 10 in this draft, if you're suddenly choosing between Topic with an ACL who doesn't shoot it great, Devin Carter, Ron Holland, and Salune, maybe that's what we're doing.
He plays with great energy, and then his shot's 33% in a pro league, as opposed to Ron Holland, who's also in a pro league, and Matas Buzelis, who are sub 30% shooters in a pro league. And then you look at Castle, who's not going to be available at 10 for the Jazz. He won a championship in collegiate basketball, but he was sub 30% as well. So of those guys, even though you describe him as perhaps the most raw, his numbers bear out the best from 3. And then he's got the biggest body. Like, I know him and Buzelis have comparable measurables. Well, Salon, I think, is going to put on 20 pounds in the course of his professional career, and I don't think Buzelis can put on that weight.
All right. Wins at 29 and 32. We hit those next with Leif Thulin on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Baylor Shireman is the only one we talk about, right?
It's got to be.
Can he really be at 29?
No, he's going to go top 20.
All right, then let's address this for a second. You have 29 and 32. I don't know if it gets you there. Do we think that 29 and 32 can get you into the 20s in this draft? Is there anybody who wants 2 of picks in this draft?
The Suns at 22, because they need non-guaranteed contract. But they want Kolek, and the Jazz like Kolek. So, although I'm not sure I'm supposed to say that about Kolek.
All right. So this gets me to an interesting player. And I think this draft is really fascinating to look. This draft's going to be as interesting a draft ever to look back on. And for 2 reasons. And I actually asked Justin about both these yesterday. I think this draft is fascinating for 2 reasons. There's a bunch of players who got in really bad situations this year. The G League being one of them, USC being another. And then there's a bunch of guys that are really old because of COVID.
Yep.
And Kolek's one of those, Connect's one of those, Shireman's one of those. I mean, they're 23 playing 18-year-olds. That's the equivalent of a senior in high school playing an 8th grader. No kidding, they're kicking the crap out of them.
Hey, I've played on the
roller.
8th
grader beating up on a 4th grader. Like, what are we doing? This is ridiculous.
I had that experience. I played on the varsity team in 8th grade.
And you got hammered.
Yeah, so, it wasn't fun.
Right. So a little of this I find I'm super scared of the old guys. I'm not as much as I like Baylor Shireman and everything he's doing, I watch him, I like him, and then I wonder if everything he's doing is because he's 23. Like, at some point, it's just because you're 23 playing 18-year-olds. All right. with that said, Isaiah Collier and Ron Holland are the two that to me get really interesting. They're the number one and two high school players in the country. And Zanuck said, well, you got to figure out if the things that they don't do well now, that they need to do well, they didn't do then also, or that their skills. But Isaiah Collier to me, I mean, I did see him take a 3-point shot that banked and didn't hit rim. Okay. I mean, when he misses by a mile.
Yep.
But you want to talk about our first conversation, like downhill skills, get to the rim, might be the best in the draft.
Yep.
If he's really going 22, 23 to the Knicks.
I don't think he will.
Where do you think he's going?
15.
All right. If he really goes 22, 23 to the Knicks, should the Jazz go get him?
Absolutely. I have him 12 on my board, so I'm a fan of Collier. He reminds me a little bit a different player of Maxey in the sense that Maxey shot horribly at Kentucky, but everything he did was like, wow, that dude's differently athletic. Like he's lightning fast. He gets wherever he wants. He's just missing. Collier's not the shooter nor the athlete that Maxey is, but Maxey went 21 just because he didn't shoot well. Collier doesn't shoot well, but he gets the rim at will, even though you know he's going there. So if you refine some things, that's a top 15 player. So
I mean, in day and age of 5-out offenses, like that we saw in the NBA Finals for the most part, like Collier, if he can pass out of it, which at times he threw the ball in the third row, like, but if he's got someone one-on-one, he's getting to the rim. He's collapsing the defense. He's getting an advantage for everybody else.
Yeah, I'd be appalled if he falls to 20.
Okay. Is there any reason you should take him at 10 if he's going 15?
The reason I would hesitate to do that is because I think there's more value of the wings traits of versatility than Collier, because you don't know that he's going to be better than George, and at least at the wings traits you cover more positions. But honestly, I don't have much separating the players that we have at 10 versus 12. Like I have Collier ahead of Devin Carter and one spot behind Connect. So
okay. I like Devin Carter. I think he really plays the game smart. He understands it, comes off pick and roll, snakes it, moves it, does all the things, plays off pin downs, plays really, really hard, physical. I love guys that are willing to touch people. I've talked about this all week long. Like it's one of the first things I watch about a player is he actually willing to touch someone? Like Dalton Connect, I watched for 2 games. He never touched anyone. It makes me really scared. Like maybe he was told not to because they play such good defense. Who knows? But like, are you willing to actually like get hit, get touched, get beat? So I really like Devin Carter. Am I crazy that I would take McCain over Carter?
No, because he's young and he's a better shooter, and those are things that are valued in the NBA. The thing about McCain is you have to really believe he's a point guard. And I know you brought that up yesterday in our brief conversation, but I would hesitate because watching him at Duke, he was fine on pick and roll, but they also had better athletes than everyone, and that gives me pause.
Yeah, I mean, he's 6'3", maybe 6'2", so he's got to play point guard. He was in the 93rd percentile on 69 pick and rolls, which isn't a lot, but it's good, right? Like yep. Reed Shepherd, we all think Reed Shepherd can play point guard. I think maybe you don't. He's 93% on 80 pick and rolls, right? There aren't that many guys that had 100 pick and roll. I mean, there aren't, like, it's hard to find, right? Like Bub Carrington had 193 pick and rolls.
I like Bub. I would consider Bub at 10. I don't think we will, but for the same reason, I don't think they will for Collier, but I would consider him because he is a pick and roll savant. His team was terrible, and he got good shots for them all the time. And his mid-range jump shot is great. And I know his 3-point percentage was low. His percentile is bad. He went 22 of 25, shooting like 25-footers off the dribble at the combine.
That's interesting because I will admit that when I watched, I don't know who I watched, but I watched Pittsburgh play somebody and wasn't watching Bub Carrington, and Bub Carrington popped out on the screen like 5 times for me to the point where I wrote down his name. His first name wasn't Bub. It was something else.
Carlton.
And then I couldn't find him anywhere because there was no Carlton Carrington in any draft books because he's now called Bub. Like, yeah. So I actually kind of am with you on him in that sense. I was early on him. Like I had him at like 14 early in the process. Then everyone was like, he can't shoot at all. And he was at 31. And I kind of just kept him there. And now I think he's going to go in the lottery. Okay, let's talk about shooting for a second.
Okay.
Like this is the story to me of this draft, and it's going to be a story of the retrospective on this draft. So when I've gone through the history, here are the guys that in the last 6 years, 25 years, who were guys that might play on the outside, whose catch and shoot was below 30% tile. Okay. Şengün, Bouknight, Kuminga, Zaire Williams, Jang, Oklahoma City, Peyton Watson, Killian Hayes, Josh Giddey, Isaac Okoro. I mean,
Yeah.
not one of them can shoot yet. Okay, here's your outlier. And he was at 20%. Tyrese Maxey, Nasir Little, Romeo Langford, Patrick Baldwin, Dyson Daniels, Marshawn Beauchamp, Cam Reddish, Isaiah Stewart, Precious Achua. That's it. Jared Culver, 34. Jalen Hood-Schifino, 32. Huh?
I said that was a terrible pick for Culver.
But I mean, like, okay, wait a sec. Like, I just gave you, over the last 5 years, I just gave you 12 names. One of them, I mean, I might give you 20 names. One of them panned out, right?
Yep.
Okay, spot up percentile guys that were below 30%. Book Night, Kuminga, Jang, Watson, Hayes, Little, Daniels below 40%. Beauchamp, Reddish, same guys. Achua, Hood-Schifino, Anthony Black, Josh Christopher, Patrick Williams. Ironically enough, Victor Wembanyama, Jaime Jaquez. Jaime Jaquez got through it. Okay. This year, pick and roll or spot up shooters below 30%. Bazulis or below 40% was Holland, Castle, Carrington, Oso, Salune, Dunn. Collier's at 43, but that's not. Topic is at 44. Okay. Catch and shoot guys that are in the danger zone. Similar names: Bazulis, Holland, Castle, Topic. Like, maybe it's too simplistic. But if you told me I'm drafting one of the guys on the previous list I just gave you, like every single one of those, other than Tyrese Maxey, right?
Yeah.
Would go down as being like a mistake pick.
Yeah, other than like Peyton Watson, just because he's so good on defense.
Sure, and he was the 30th, but and we'll see if he turns it. Maybe he'll turn out to shoot. He was the 30th pick. Mm-hmm. But like Hayes' mistake, I think Giddey, you can say was a mistake. Like Dyson Daniels, like.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see whether or not any of these guys. Kuminga's the best shooter of that whole group, by the way, and I'm not sure you think that Jonathan Kuminga is really a shooter.
Yeah, I don't think he is.
I mean, Maxey's done it. By the way, I heard a Dillingham to Maxey reference, by the way, that figured you'd like since you're a Dillingham lover.
I don't think they play similarly because he doesn't pressure the rim the same way. But okay. I do. The reason I like Dillingham is like what I said yesterday about like Lou Williams-esque scoring is rare. And if you give him the ball, he'll score 20. It just won't be on a good team.
All right. What are your wins at 29 and 32?
Nikola Jurisic, Isaiah Crawford.
Wait, who?
Nikola Jurisic.
Who's this? I've never heard of this guy.
6'8".
This is why you're on the show.
Yeah, 6'8", 2 guard from Serbia. Shoots the ball well. Shows flashes as a secondary ball handler.
And where is he projected?
25, 30.
Okay.
And then Isaiah Crawford's about 35, 40 on some people's board. I got a good stat for you on this one.
Okay.
It's a 7. I don't know if his is 7'2", but there's 5 players in the NBA with 7'2" wingspans, 10.5-inch hand size, and 6'7" height or better. It's Kawhi Leonard, Tari Eason, Patrick Williams. Who am I missing? OG Anunoby, and then he would be the 5th.
Okay. I heard you mention this stat because I listened to all 5 episodes of Locked On Jazz. I would have, if I was in the chat room, I would have asked you, who are the players who had that didn't make the NBA, right? Like, I get that. You understand my question?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I got it. If you have those things and you make the NBA, then you're great. But it doesn't, those aren't the only 5 players who've ever had that stat, right? I'm guessing. Like, I'd like to go through the combines. If they are the only 5, then let's take him. But I'd be interested who the other 5 or the other 10 are that might not be in the NBA.
I would have to research that further. That's a good question. But the stat itself on the positive spin, I think, is unique enough you take him off trades.
Okay. And that is Isaiah who?
Crawford. He also shot 39% from 3. The issue with him is he's 22.
Yeah, old guys make you nervous. But Baylor Simon's really old too, and we love him.
Yeah.
I like KJ Simpson.
I don't think he's a good point guard.
Okay.
I've watched a lot of Colorado.
He's really small. I actually might like everybody in Colorado because they had the big 300-pound fat guy in the middle of the lane, and therefore they couldn't do anything. And so I'm just assuming that all of them's lives will be better.
You called me one time I was at March Madness my first year working for the Jazz, and I told you I was going to be there. So it wasn't like I was in trouble or anything, but I couldn't hear anything you were saying. And everyone was chanting, Eddie, 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 because they went to overtime because he scored 18 and Eddie hit like a game tying shot. So I've loved him ever since.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your work filling in for Locked On Jazz. I think everyone has enjoyed it. Thank you for your time today. And we'll be back with you on Wednesday for a little, I will be solo for just a final recap, but this is your kind of final draft, all the stuff you need, giving you 36 hours before the draft to actually take it in and listen to it. So thank you very much to Leif. We now send you the first ever 24/7 national sports channel, Locked On Sports Today. If you're on YouTube, if you're on audio, go check it out. Plus, there's a new show. Search Big 6 and 60 and see what you find.